Good evening. It's Tuesday, February 10th. We're here for our Clayton City Council meeting at 6 o'clock. Anna Crane, our planning director, is going to give us a presentation on planned unit developments.
Okay. Are you good? Good. Okay. Great. So today, apologize for my voice that's going. I think I've finally succumbed to the cold that's been going around, despite my best efforts. So today, I want to take us through planning developments. I kind of look back, it's kind of been almost a year since we talked about PUDs, and we kind of put it on hold to finish the non-residential mixed-use zoning that we adopted recently. So now it's time to pick back up on the plan unit developments and our public benefits. So the purpose that we're implementing here from the comprehensive plan is to review our public benefit point system to identify opportunities to better align with our objectives. Summarizing the purpose of a PUD really comes down to trying to create a more desirable, creative atmosphere of a development that doesn't fit within all of the standards of our base zoning district. So usually we're trying to either address some sort of unique circumstance that's created by that lot, so we're doing a more natural development, or preserving aspects of a property that create unique situations, or there's some aspects of the new development, mixture of uses, otherwise that would move it outside of our base zoning districts. So looking at the existing regulations, the common modifications, the top one, minimum unit size, was one that sent almost all of our more recent developments into the PUD. We've already addressed that issue by removing that minimum size from the base zoning district, so that would no longer be a trigger. Outside of that, most projects go into the PUD category because they're increasing the floor area ratio, something that we also have addressed in a pretty significant way with our new base zoning district for these non-residential zoning unit or zoning districts, or decreasing a setback, decreasing your parking requirement. So essentially what most often gets somebody into a PUD based on what we've seen as PUDs so far is facilitating more building that wouldn't be allowed in the base zoning district. And then our common benefits, so we're trying to create that more creative development. We see architectural distinction, we see LEED, EV charging, and public art is what's most commonly used right now. And the modifications establish how many points you need, and then you have all of the points assigned to the benefits. So in reviewing previous projects, best practices, everything like that, what our takeaway was is that the existing system really doesn't reflect what I would call some of our obvious priorities. So those are the ones that we value the most. I feel like a PUD, when it's a public benefit system, like what we want to set up here, we almost should have that flashing sign, like pointing, making it hard for people to ignore the things that we want them to do. Our code, the way it's set up right now, doesn't really do that. And one of what you see, kind of an example, is that we require LEED silver design to qualify for a PUD. So people are already designing to LEED silver, but then some of the most common benefits that people point to for their developments are also requirements of LEED silver. So they're not really elevating their project more beyond what we find is like that minimum threshold. And then some comprehensive plan goals, and I'll go into this list a little bit more. So what we've done is adjusted our base, so that creates a better kind of starting point for development, especially within our downtown area, that M3 zoning district now. And then we want to adjust our structure. So we want to guide development, like that flashing sign I talked about. And the biggest thing that I also want to frame our minds about with zoning, so zoning it facilitates development of property and construction and land use, but it isn't the catalyst for it. So in an ideal world, what we would need to do is find that happy medium for facilitating development that's already going to be built because that's what's being demanded. So developers are really good at following what the market dictates because that's what they can then successfully fund and finance and get revenue from, right? So developers are good at telling you what the market demands, especially in our area. So what we want to do is make some predictability, because if you can find that happy medium between a code that facilitates development, creates that predictability for a developer, and you're requesting the uses that the market's already demanding, then you get the projects that come here. So what we don't want to do is have our zoning code or our PUD system be kind of like the barrier to that market demand. So how are we going to do that? Going into recommendations today, I would like to get some feedback from you guys. So there's gonna be a little bit more. I know I didn't send this to you in advance, but that's okay. I want to hear a little bit kind of what comes to mind firsthand through some of this. So we're recommending going into a tiered system. The requirements for qualification, the base requirements for the project, I'm not proposing any changes to it this time. So for a residential PUD, currently you have to have a residential zoning district as your base zoning district that you're rezoning out of. And the land area of that project needs to be a minimum of 30,000 square feet. So it should be the larger residential projects that are facilitating. There's something about that project. What we wouldn't want to do is lower that and have people come here to get PUDs for a single story or a single family home or something of that nature. So I don't see the need to adjust that. And similarly for mixed use, we have a minimum of 50,000 square feet for the gross building area. So again, you want a little bit of a larger, more substantial building that's directing you into this PUD format. And then what I'm proposing is a tiered system of 3 tiers. The base is kind of just a more standard project, but it has some unique elements. So we want to be modifying standards that are not impacting our density or our use. So for an example, a setback. So you might move the setback. So you're facilitating more creative or different orientation and placement of buildings, but you're not substantially increasing the density of that use compared to its neighbor. So for base 1, tier 1, we'll get into what a priority benefit is on the future slide. So if you're a tier 1 PUD, you would need a priority benefit plus 1 additional benefit. So that's 2 benefits that we'll outline. If you go up to a tier 2, now you're slightly elevated. So now you're modifying standards that impact your density up to a 90% change. Looking at past projects, we had anywhere from essentially a 20%. So their setback was being reduced by 20%, or their floor area ratio is being increased. So once we start impacting density, this might be they want to have 4 stories where they're only allowed 3 in the base zoning district. That's increasing their density or their floor area ratio. Or if you're modifying a use requirement. So that one, I think the reason that I elevated that to tier 2 is because it just requires a little bit more scrutiny, because we go through a process to have what uses are allowed in certain areas. And that's a pretty intentional process that we do. So tier 2 is elevated that. Under tier 2, you would have, again, a priority benefit and then 2 additional benefits. And out of those 3 benefits that you need to have, at least one of them has to be classified as a tier 2 benefit. And then tier 3 premium. So those are those larger projects where you're modifying either 4 or more standards. So you have a lot more things you're asking to modify, or you're more substantially increasing the density of that project related to the base zoning district. So we're really just creating a hierarchy in terms of like the scale or impact a development and the modifications might have. So this is a lot of words on the screen. We'll go through in segments what this is, and that's where I'll start asking for a little bit of feedback. But just to give you the overall framework of what we have our required qualifications. So meet LEED Silver design. That's maintaining something that we already have for the PUD requirements, but we're removing a lot of those LEED Silver aspects, not all of them, but a lot of them from the rest of the benefit list. So we'll lead that. We'll do some retail ready if that's applicable. So if it is a project that has a retail first floor component to it, then we're having a little bit more of what does it mean to actually produce a retail product that's ready for somebody to occupy. And then we need to create this priority benefit list. So I have a couple of more general ideas of the priority benefits based on looking at the comp plan and some of the things I've heard, but I want us to talk about that a little bit more. The idea of the priority benefit list is these are benefits that would be classified under a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, but these are the ones with the flashing yellow sign that's pointing here. So those are going to be very specific. Everybody has to choose one from the list and how that would be incorporated into their project. So under the tier one, what I tried to do is look at some of our existing benefits or elements of projects that have been approved in the past. The tier ones are should be a little bit more achievable. So maybe the cost for a developer to choose this is a little bit lower. They might have to tweak their project a little bit less to get it, but it's still something that we value. So that's the tier one. Tier two gets into a little bit more impact on the project design as somebody chooses that. Or it might be something that we just value a little bit more, even if it isn't going to be that much of an impact on a developer's bottom line. It's something that we value. And then again, tier three are the ones that we value the most. So I've lumped these into some categories to try and help you guys think through what might be missing from the list or other things you might want us to consider. So we're looking at design benefits, the category of design, things that would impact that. Under tier one, so our entry level benefits, I would say, we have access features or provisions to existing or planned public transit facilities. This is an existing benefit. We don't see it often used. So that's why it's kind of a tier one. I think it would still be benefits potentially to people depending on how they facilitate it, but we'll leave that at one. Public art is something that we do see chosen a lot from the list right now, but I wouldn't say that public art, while it's the ones that we see around are nice and they look nice, and for Scythia, I think that those were great additions to help that building, but it's not really significantly adding to the context of the environment that we're creating. So I'll put that one at tier one. Extensive use of high quality building materials. So that's another one that seems to be a pretty much almost like an expectation of PUDs that they're using these high quality materials. Rooftop activation is an interesting one that came from a conversation I had with Ryan, our planner, and he was talking about how rooftop creates a destination point and really can attract people, and the success of a lot of people that frequent, I think, the rooftop at the AC Hotel that might not otherwise have been coming downtown. So I think that's an interesting one that I wanted to call out. So as we think a little bit outside of the box, what are those elements of projects that you find unique or exciting or something you might want to, a trend we might want to build on? So this list, I think, will need to be revised every few years as things happen and change and the context changes. But rooftop activation was a feature that I wanted to throw in there. Architectural distinction in tier two, enhancing public open space or public infrastructure, and preservation of architecturally, historically significant buildings. Kind of going back towards, we want to value a little bit of an element of preservation. We've heard about it a lot before, but the most sustainable thing you can do is not tear down a building. So I do think that while people can go back and forth under historic significance and their personal preferences there, it kind of is tied to both design and sustainability. And then tier three would be that fully below grade parking structure. So that's a great example of valuing it as a tier three because it's a very expensive endeavor. It's one that we've all heard about from people about the costs involved with it. So you want to kind of weight that value accordingly. So I'm going to pause here with design as I went through all of that. Is there anything when you think about great design or benefits in the design category, looking at projects here, places you've visited that you would want to be considered by staff under a benefit of a design?
We don't have to go in order if anybody wants to just jump in.
What about, I don't recall, I know that this is a cause for an issue, but whether it's a benefit or not, and that would be a more significant setback of some sort, creating more either sidewalk space or some other visual benefit on the ground floor.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't
just give me an idea.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to directly endorse or refute whatever you guys say, because I do want you to just talk, because I can then use what you're valuing and figure out how to work it in. So, yep.
When you said the retail ready, does that fall under here?
That would be if they're including retail as a component of their, so if it's a mixed use project and to provide that mixture of uses, they're choosing to provide retail, then that would be retail ready would be necessary. It is not listed here under uses, use category, which we'll get to later. I do have a little bit about that, but retail ready itself isn't under design.
It's not under.
But I hear that could be a priority we want to make sure is hit home.
Well, I just, I don't know. I only bring that up because in terms of a design element, because I found it frustrating learning that a lot of Bemis in Place does not have high enough ceilings for elaborate kitchens, except for at the corner. So I don't know, thinking about how we encourage them to have higher ceilings at the first floors so that there's more interest from more interest from retail tenants to have, again, I think everybody appreciates higher ceilings, but you can't have a restaurant unless the ceilings are high enough,
Okay.
like a full service restaurant.
Yep.
So,
Anna, you're probably going to get to this, but with your benefits, is the system you're proposing still one where it's on a rating system from 1 to 5, that type of thing?
No, so what I'm proposing here removes the point allocations. So I'm trying to pull back a little bit and find a little bit more of that happy medium. So the predictability is that we have essentially valued our benefits as a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So that is how we value it, rather a numeric value of 1 to 5. So they fall into those categories. So it gives you guys still some discretion to evaluate what they've proposed, but a little bit more flexibility in that.
I was wondering particularly about the ones that sort of lend themselves to being a matter of opinion. I think we've differed in the past on like architectural distinction. You know, the plan commission thought, yeah, it looks pretty distinct, and the developer asked for a 5, we'll give them a 3, and then we come into this room and some people say, I don't look that great to me, I'd only give them a 1. So I'm glad we're getting rid of that approach, but it still raises questions about who decides whether something is architecturally distinctive. But that's just a problem that's inherent in that, I suppose.
I think so.
yeah, I think that's a good point, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I am concerned about that and would suggest we even consider removing it, or how can you like quantify it, or like how would you actually define it,
Mhm.
right? Because I don't believe I've ever seen in my top 5 years here a building that I would describe as architecturally distinct, but the plan commission would come to us with 3 to 5 points on that category. And I was like, how? Like, no one is going to be like, recognize that building if they see it out of context, or, anyways.
So just,
So what-
oh, I was going to build on that, but
Yeah,
finish,
go ahead.
sorry. Well, was just to say then, as an idea, would it make sense or would it restrict creativity too much to provide guidance on this? For example, here's the definition of architecturally significant: A, B, and C need to be qualified. Whatever, or all the other things. The bad news part would be it's narrows it perhaps. The good news part is it becomes more objective.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add, which as an idea that I've brought up before, that I think you basically have covered here, is the public open space. Like, there's that privately owned public open space idea. And so I like that. And I don't have any other ideas.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on what both you said at the open space. I think that anything, the public gathering space is great if there's a flow around the city, and whether that's the sidewalk connectivity, whether it's bike lanes, or something that helps connect the connectivity around the city itself. The other part is I like the transit access, and I think the bigger goal there is to reduce the reliance on needing to drive around Clayton, because parking spaces end up taking so much of the development that we actually want to happen, and it stops the connectivity in the open spaces. So I don't know what that would be, whether it be a residential place that has their shuttle or whatever it might be, but that idea of reducing or providing some transportation mode.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with the concept of architectural distinction, with the public benefits, the way that we're outlining, part of the nice side of removing the quantified values is that we are able to be a little bit more broad, but we can get more specific. So if there are specific architectural elements of buildings that you all find to be distinctive and things that you would want to see that we're not getting here. I mean, I think a lot about a former Plan Commission member, Bob Denlow, is wanting some sort of curved facade. He would talk about that. I'm sure you remember Kami. So things like that we can put in here to qualify what our architectural distinction is. The code is a little bit set in stone and that we have to go through this public hearing process to adopt it. So if we put elements like that, it's in the code. If the first curved building you see, you actually hate and you never want a curved building again, there's a little bit of a delayed effect of having to remove that from the code. But at the same time, if there are elements that you all agree and the ARB agree are important, we can have some really broad benefits outlined in here and we can have some really specific ones. So I would encourage you all to, spend some time over the next couple weeks thinking about buildings that you do find architecturally distinctive and significant and help frame that a little bit.
I assume the system would still be where the PUD application goes through the Plan Commission and ARB
Correct.
with a recommendation.
Yeah, I think the process itself is functioning well. I don't think that we need to change any of that process in this.
I would hope some of this heavy lifting in terms of architectural distinction would rest with the Plan Commission and the ARB, because those are people we select to be on there because we think they actually have some background in architecture, real estate, so that when it comes to the council, we might give them some presumption that they know what they're talking about.
I guess I would want to add green space and public gathering spaces and like seating, if people from the building can come out for lunch and just have a place to sit and just like activate corners and things like that. I think maybe defining like street level distinction, like when you're like walking downtown, what is it, like the first 12 feet in height are really important, so that if there's something like that we can kind of define to elevate at least like the walkable, street level distinction, I think would be a good idea. And then with the rooftop activation, I think that's a great idea. I just don't know if we want to say like rooftop ready, kind of like how you were saying with like retail ready. But then how does that play if you have to have like a green roof or kind of those things? Is that still part of the LEED or silver, or how does that work?
So they can get LEED silver without green roofs. So we've had a couple blue roofs, I think, that have gotten some points. So there's ways to do both.
Is that still like going to be listed somewhere or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd wonder too, I think having architectural distinction would still be important, and thinking about how we can define that better, because I understand everybody's concern about that. But when I think about architecturally distinctive, of course, I think about, buildings in downtown Chicago, but also the new residential building on Skinker. That is, everybody knows where that building is. So I think thinking about something like that. I would also just wonder extensive use of high quality building materials, because I feel like that was also something that people would throw like at the PUD, before ARB, they'd be like, oh, we used high quality building materials. I just wonder how you'll decide that, how you're, because I would hope that everybody's using relatively high quality building materials to build anything down around here. So I would just wonder how you quantify that too.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I would agree. One other thing, I would be interested in considering the giving benefits to the preservation of a building, even if it's not architecturally historically significant. I don't know if we actually have buildings that we want to be torn down, but if we're talking about it from a sustainability perspective, then it really is a benefit, even if the building isn't that interesting. So I would want to incentivize, I wouldn't want to caveat it with architecturally historically significant. Also, has the ARB seen this?
No.
Yeah, so I'd be interested in their ideas about how one could actually try to define architectural significance and distinction.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we have a update with them on the next Plan Commission agenda
Awesome.
for a bunch of topics like this.
Mhm.
Okay, use benefits. So this is where we get into a little bit more specifics on the use. I did not identify any use benefits under Tier 1. Tier 2, we talk about provision of missing housing types. So this is one that needs to be massaged a little bit, but the goal of this is The comp plan talks about facilitating townhomes, or maybe we've talked about mixture of uses within apartments, having a little bit more weight on those multi-bedroom units. That type of a thing would be a benefit. And then tier 3 is where you're getting into the benefit when you actually create affordable or workforce housing with that. So rather than just providing that mix of market rate, when you actually get affordable, then that goes into tier 3. Inclusion of public parking, I think, is another one. So as much as we can facilitate, shared parking. Entertainment use as a significant component. Contributing to affordable consumer CEA, so our consumer emphasis area uses. So we've designated a lot of uses, as you recall, with our new non-residential mixed use zoning that identify what we kind of think are consumer-driven uses. So provisions to contribute to those spaces either through establishing lower than market rate rents for a certain number of years in your development for that first floor, or covering some of those tenant fit-out costs. That's something we're diving into a little bit more to quantify, but I do think that that would be something that if they're already building those spaces, maybe we'll have kind of a lower impact on their, if they know they're doing it up front, a lower impact on their bottom line, but a really significant positive impact from us, from our standpoint. And then also something that we need to kind of, I wanted to leave a little bit vague. The comp plan talks a lot about diversifying our tax base or significant sales tax revenue generators. So leaving that a little bit more open, because again, the applicant has the burden of proving what they're proposing meets this for your all approval. So that's a little bit more of an open-ended category for tier 3.
Just a thought on that last one.
Yeah.
I generally like the idea of encouraging something with significant tax increase, sales tax revenue. However, then I think of like a dispensary. I mean, I wouldn't want to have a whole bunch of dispensaries come in as a result of this. While that might be good for sales tax, I don't think our residents would be in favor of that. So I don't know if we can qualify that in any way, but if we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Aren't there only like a couple parcels where we could have one anyways? Just in that specific example. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't-
Like
Like,
have to be,
because
this
of
would
the
be one
distances
close to
from
the current
churches and
one.
schools and all
Yeah.
that.
Is we can qualify that or
Yeah.
attach it to CA approved uses from that list.
Yeah, we can expand it. I mean, also to qualify, the project has to be at least 50,000 gross square feet. So it's not every project that's going to qualify for a PUD anyway. An example is the Sterling Bank project doesn't even qualify to go through the PUD process because the building they're proposing is too small. So we have, yes, but I do want to make, I hear you on the accidentally leaving a door open for something. Yeah. Any other use related thoughts? Okay. They're gonna all come to you when you leave. Okay, sustainability benefit category. So EV charging was a big one that we've been hearing a lot about recently. So I took a stab at it in establishing 10% of your required parking being EV. That would be a tier 1. And then if you wanted to go over 50%, you get into that tier 2 category.
Are those like actual stations or is that just EV ready?
This would be actual stations, the way that I was thinking of it at this point. Other ones being green infrastructure for stormwater mitigations, that would be any green roofs or bioswales or other things like that, which might also get somebody lead points, but would also be something that was more specifically called out. Extraordinary landscaping green space. I see that one maybe is with some tweaks covering kind of something you were talking about earlier, Kami, with the open space. And then going into tier 3, alternative energy sources or elevating your design to meet LEED Gold or higher standards. So silver being the minimum entry level. If you go above that, that would get you a tier 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at my notes from the St. Louis Climate Summit. I was paying attention.
Okay.
But one thing that they talked about a lot was in design and development, like look at it with your budget, the cost of the emissions and the coal and everything else you're using, the long-term impact of that. And typically you're going to find that by being more environmentally aware, you're actually saving money in the long term. So how you put that into a building code, I don't know if it's with the systems, with the benchmarking, I don't know how to do it, but it sounds like it can be done, and that could be something beyond just looking for EV chargers and thing, and in the development of the building, because whatever's built there carries forward many, many years.
Mhm.
I guess you could put the thing I mentioned before about building on this slide.
Yeah, I just grouped them into categories to try and
Yeah.
help facilitate the discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
And alternative energy sources would be like solar panels,
Right.
like a broad solar panel, right?
Wind power, yeah,
Power, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so breezing through this, the priority benefits list. So a little bit of this will then come once we have those benefits of 1, 2, and 3 called out. But this was my initial thought. The providing workforce or affordable housing for a priority benefit, it might be something, and I'll listen for some feedback on this. If there's a floor, so if, as a priority benefit, if somebody were to select this, is there some sort of floor on the number of units that would get to a level of a priority benefit versus a lower level benefit? I'm not sure where that falls with everybody. The affordable commercial retail spaces for small businesses, entertainment uses in downtown, again, that public parking provision, as well as EV charging. So I want with the priority benefits to try and have a little bit of a range of some smaller priority and some larger one, because remember with tier 1, you have to choose it, no matter what tier your project is, you have to choose a priority benefit. And then for the higher tier, like a tier 3 project, they could choose their priority benefit is also one that's leveled at tier 3, or they could choose a tier 1 priority benefit and have their tier 3 benefit be something else from that tier 3 list. So what we don't want to do is have our priority benefits be only the really large elements of a project that are really expensive, just in terms of facilitating all levels of development.
Wait, each tier has to pick one priority benefit?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because like EV charging seems like really easy.
Right. So that might be something you say is a priority, but you don't want it on this list, in which case we could say it's a priority by moving it up a tier or something like that.
Yeah, I just feel like if a tier 3 is choosing that, that seems like a little bit of an easy out for them.
They would
compared to, like, all
also
these
have to
other
choose a
things.
tier 3.
Say that again?
They would also have to choose a tier 3.
Which is
Oh, from the
harder.
previous list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a little bit of like, I'm almost get it, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm gonna
I might
go-
be all of them.
Yeah.
Right? So like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, if if a project is classified as a tier 3, just to qualify, they would have to design to LEED Silver. If they're also mixed use, they would need to be retail ready for that retail component. And they would choose one of these priority benefits that's listed here.
And LEED Silver doesn't have EV charging?
Oh, so LEED Silver, there's a variety of ways to design to meet the points.
Okay.
So it could be that they, kind of layer EV charging in that way. So the tier 3 person would choose one of this list. That would be one of the 4 benefits that they're required. They have to have at least one tier 3. So if they chose EV charging, which is a tier 2, they're doing 50% or whatever, tier 2, they would still have to choose another item from this list, along with 2 other benefits from any tier.
I guess I'm struggling with the quantitative versus the qualitative.
Mhm.
What's required for each.
Yeah.
No, I was trying to understand the difference. Either does qualify as silver or it doesn't. But when you get into, do you have a developer basically come to staff and say, okay, well, we're going to do some affordable housing. We'll do a couple of units. And then you ask them, so what do you mean by affordable? I mean, I'm trying to figure out at what point does it still, is it, so many of these are subjective that it's hard. You do pick one off the list and you do a little of it, but then you're trying to decide, is that enough? And is that The staff, I guess, can make a recommendation. Planning
Yeah,
commission-
it's with this type of a zoning with we're never gonna build the perfect black and white system because PUDs or plan developments inherently need to have a little bit of that discretionary element that the city council holds in approving it. So the wording that I had on those screens for benefits, those were not completely flushed out wording. We're not at that level yet. So there will be a variety of pretty easy, are 50% of your parking spaces fit with EV chargers? That's pretty much a yes or a no question. Architectural distinction is a little bit up to to the discretion of the ARB and the city council. So there's going to be a mixture of both of those in here for sure.
I gotta push back a little bit on the public parking, because again, if we say we have all this parking here that's not being used, and again, yeah, I've said it before, it's so well documented that parking ends up pushing out everything else the city can do. So if we have spaces now, if there's an alternative, provide the parking or an alternative to the parking to get people around, or partnership with the building next door, or however you want to word it. So it's not, you get benefits for building more parking spaces, but you still have to provide the need for the people using the building and the public.
Yeah, I feel like public parking is the biggest thing.
It is, but the more we build parking, the more we push out
Yeah.
other activities, and it's a long-term impact on what we're doing. So if we have the parking spaces, let's get incentives to get those used.
Yeah. What do you think about shared parking agreements?
That's,
Yeah, I think this is a real area of tension, because I'm glad you brought it up. Because we know people always feel like there's not enough parking and they want more parking that is right in front of the door that they're going to. And I still believe that I have this idea that, I mean, across the city, we have more than enough parking spaces. It's just a question of whether people know where they are and are willing to walk the distance that they'd happily walk from one end of a mall to the other, but they have to do it outside. And they feel like that's really hard for some reason. So, and like, I feel like a lot of the trends that I've heard about are talking about actually like reducing parking requirements. And so I don't know what else you would say about that or how to think about it, but it feels a little like fraught to me.
Sure.
Or can you say even like if it's in a place where there isn't parking, or like can we identify like certain areas that we think really need public parking, or I don't know.
you could also put it on the developer to come up with that proposal. The incentive is to come up with
Right.
providing parking without whatever,
Mhm.
So just in terms of the framework, I like the framework. I think it's creative. I think it is going in a direction of trying to be more definitive and achieve goals that we want as we go forward. So I like that. I'm wondering, and I appreciate your comments about planned developments carrying a great deal of discretion. I'm wondering, though, if we can either look to other communities or if there are any constraints from a legal standpoint about the kind of guidelines we give or the thresholds. Like, are there some things that we already know wouldn't stand up? You said 50%. What if we said 75? And I'm not arguing for that, but I'm saying, when does it become a threshold that's too high? And when do we create goals or standards that aren't reasonable? Do we have some kind of standards to look to that we can be assured or at least comfortable that's what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, nationwide, a lot of planned development. So if you look at other communities, most of them will refer to it as a planned development. Planned unit development actually came out of like residential unit planned developments. But anyway, so planned developments across a lot of them rely on what used to be our PUD system, where you pretty much have your purpose statements, and then, are you meeting those things or not? So there aren't that many systems across the country that are really black and white with the point systems that have remained, because it's hard to stay relevant and predict those ins and outs. But when you adopt this code, you're setting what you feel are the benefits that inform or implement those purpose statements. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I would just observe that the courts have given us really great black and white guidelines on how far you can go with exactions. They have to be rationally related to the regulation in question and roughly proportional to the impact of the development. So there's real clear guidance that we can apply without any problem.
Okay.
Yeah, the number one clue, if you make the PUD benefits just not balance with what people are developing, is that people won't develop under a PUD. That will be the biggest clue. If we put the threshold of how do you meet a standard of a benefit for a PUD too high, we will never hit it, and they will never ask about it, or they will constantly be asking for you to change it, that type of a thing. So.
Yeah, and I guess all the other part then, aside from the constraint standpoint was, it's always helpful to learn from what others have done before you. And so this may be unique, but if there are others, it's always good to know, especially in that area where we intended this to happen, but this is what is happening as a result of it, just so that we can learn from that.
Yep, definitely.
I guess one quick other thing is like the mechanical and the HVAC, does that fall under lead design? Because sometimes that was like a separate application for like the mechanical systems for lead.
Yeah, so a lot of times so under some of the categories for lead, people were providing that information. We had there's energy efficiency components to lead, some of which we had pulled out, or we currently pull out and provide 1.4. So sometimes in previous projects, people provided more information about their mechanical systems and the efficiencies of those to back up asking for maybe more benefit points than we had listed. So we always are, I intend to leave a little bit of the door open for that, with that category that would allow, and I don't remember if I even highlighted it on the screen when we were on that one previously, but I do here, I do think that we should still allow an applicant to try and make a case that there is a benefit that's missing. So we have a purpose statement that we currently have in our code under PUD that outlines some of these greater vision points. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility in that somebody could make a case as to how their benefit meets these purpose standards, to not completely throw everything out the door under every project. We wouldn't allow them to do that for all of their public benefits, but they could do that for one.
Yeah, because to Susan's point, like that's like such a huge energy issue with these buildings, is just all of that equipment. And so if there was some sort of like provision in here, I don't know how we could word that, but just something about designing the mechanical systems to be just more energy efficient and all the greenhouse emissions and all that, especially if it's a ground up building. But I don't know if that would deter every developer to be like, well, we're not going to do that.
I mean, that's why I wanted a little bit more of departure from some of our typical presentations, using this a little bit more of a brainstorming. So then we'll go back and we'll pull these and I'll review them a little bit more in light of what the zoning is and try and hone in some of this stuff. So there's nothing off the table right now.
It makes me wonder if we'd want to put in something, I don't know that it's appropriate or how it would be structured, but as we're embarking on building benchmarking, like participation in that, or obviously if they're building a new building, it's not going to be like an old building that they're improving, which is partly what the benchmarking.
But it's
is
good to have the metrics.
designed to do,
Yeah.
right? But I would encourage us to think about if there's any aspect of that program where we.
Yeah, that does bring
require
up an interesting,
participation.
because we have, so in our requirements right now, we require that they design to LEED Silver. We don't require that they certify the building. And then we don't have any sort of continued follow-up with them about how that building is then performing. So you
That's
bring
what
up an
benchmarking
interesting.
Would allow us to do
Yeah.
that without necessarily requiring them to pay the lead
Well, what we're
certification
here
fee.
benchmarking in private.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just thinking related
Yeah.
to some of the lead performance
Okay.
reports or something that it's making me think of some other stuff.
Although the benchmarking is by size, it's only the,
Right.
Correct.
so
Yeah.
maybe it
I didn't know
extends
they were
down
done.
to the whatever
Yeah, I
is
don't,
the
right.
appropriate level.
Yeah, they're big buildings that we require.
I was like,
Right. The other thing-
The 100,000, I believe,
100,000.
100,000. So a PUD
Space.
would qualify at 50,000.
Yeah,
So
so we
there,
could-
there could be, yeah, so that, yeah, I'll think
Yeah,
through that. a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, I love the catch-all that someone can come to us with an idea that we haven't thought about
Yeah.
to get those.
That's
But
my
to
question.
build on that though, the catch-all, like, do
Yeah.
you, and I'm not, you're qualified, but then if you're, like, is your staff the one that's like, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't qualify?
Well, it would fall the same way that we have kind of that catch-all right now with the PUD system, where people are proposing what they think their points are for that project.
Decide whether it
And
was
there's a
tier
little
one,
bit.
tier two, or tier three?
Yeah, so they would have the burden of proving that it's however they've
That
assigned
to you,
it.
or they would prove?
They would prove it to you because the
because
council is,
eventually we have to approve.
yes,
them.
you have all the
Would-
discretion. So
I
at
guess
the
you give
staff,
us a staff report.
yeah,
and
at the
we-
staff level, we'll make recommendations back
Right.
to them on how we interpret it and how we're gonna propose it to you guys, but they would have that opportunity to make that case.
The other thing I was just gonna say with EV chargers is I don't wanna encourage something, or I don't wanna give points for something that developers already realize that they have to do. I mean, I don't know how you build
Because
an
of the
apartment
market.
building these days unless you have EV charging, because how do you attract, like, I think tenants expect that now if you're building a new building. So I guess I would think about EV chargers available to the public. So because, people come to areas because they have to charge their car because maybe it's not available at home, or maybe they realize they forgot to charge their car and they, I don't know. That might be something where, if it's, and also if there's a retail component, somebody comes in and charges their car and comes and has lunch or shops at a store. So.
Okay.
Adding to that, Maplewood now I think that requires them in residential, but again, at the summit, Webster Groves was there and they're talking about how they're studying putting them all over the downtown area for that very reason, to get people to come in.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the other things I was going to bring up, similar to what the mayor just said, was this idea of the, wherever the priority benefits are listed, there's the option for the one, do you know which slide it is? That says, like, others can be, applicant may propose an alternative priority to the city council. So it's probably back on the, like,
Oh yeah, that was on our
rubric
initial.
page.
Oh.
And so what I worry about in that case, there, to be weighted at discretion of council. I worry about things that really haven't been defined at all somewhere. And that by the time it gets to us at the city council, the applicant has gone through so much work and so much back and forth with the Plan Commission and ARB. And so I'm almost trying to think about, like, it can make it hard for us to make changes or overrule or deviate significantly from what the Plan Commission ARB approves or sends on to us. And when we're talking about something like wide open like that, I just don't know that I'm comfortable with them weighing that. And so I don't know what it would look like for if something doesn't fit into an already defined category. Is there a process step in which it could come to us for some simple evaluation or discussion? I mean, I know this is complicated, but I feel like that's a real issue. Like, it's also, at first, it's a lot of, like, pressure and responsibility to put on unelected members of the Plan Commission and ARB. And it's also then, like, may not be very consistent with what we're thinking. Like, they don't know what we're thinking. I guess, we generally have a representative there who knows what most of us think, but I don't know. Those of you who've served on the board might have thoughts about that too, but I just worry about that.
That they approve, so basically the idea is that they're potentially approving something at Plan Commission ARB, and then it comes to us and there already has been a lot of discussion, and we're like, actually, that's not
We really
really
don't think that
yeah.
valuable. Like, we
Right.
don't see the benefit
in
that
that.
the Plan Commission ARB saw here, and it can derail projects.
Yeah, I mean, they are in the case of this, you do have the authority to decide that.
Right.
And the Plan Commission ARB is just a recommendation body. So they're one opinion for you to consider. I mean, I'll think about that a little bit. We have a conceptual review requirement for PUDs, so we can see if there's some way for them to get some initial feedback on it. I do think a little bit of it is them taking on that risk, though, when they choose not to.
Yeah, if they choose
They-
that
They're
option.
not choosing something that we've already pre-established how we feel about it, and they're going with one of those more gray areas. That's a risk that they are taking. So I don't want to.
Would the whole like
Was-
project just be, say, like a no if if that one, benefit is disagreed on?
I mean, that's depends on so it could be something where it's a conversation with them and they can make tweaks, or it's something where you're just saying no to it. and
Like, they
that's-
could end up picking something else instead,
Right.
right?
It's not like the end all. if we're
Or
like,
we
well,
could be like, well, you're saying
Yeah.
10% of something, but we don't feel like that's a priority. We want 50 here. I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
That
I'll,
could
I'll,
derail the
uh,
project.
I'll
And so it
Um,
could, or they could just be like, yeah, I'll do that, or I'm gonna do this other thing instead.
Yeah, I don't want to close the door completely
don't
to
know.
that discretion though, because
Yeah.
I do think sometimes cities everywhere do themselves a disservice by trying too hard to predict the future or over design regulations, and you end up removing this element of creativity and flexibility that can result in some of the best projects that you might see. So I would hate for us to present as a group that is not somewhat open to hearing any of that, understanding that the people pursuing that are doing so at their risk.
Yeah, and so I think what you're emphasizing is that you generally believe that they know they're taking on that risk.
Well, we would outline it that. So
To
I
be
think,
talking to them about it.
yeah,
during
that's
the
where we
application
can,
process
yeah,
and-
yeah, we would massage that a little bit and
That's
what are
cool.
the kind of the grounds for pursuing that avenue.
Thank you.
I would just add that if you're thinking in terms of the council's flexibility on valuing benefits of a variety of types of benefits, the one constraint you do have is you can't say, well, we no longer value workforce affordable housing. If you don't want to value that, if you've got it in the rules and you say that's a benefit, you can't, when someone comes in saying, well, we no longer think that's a benefit, we don't give you credit for that. We get to change the rules. If we don't want to continue to value that, amend the ordinance
Right.
and take it out.
Like, we would need to put in really potentially a review process and some timeline where maybe it's a retreat item or something, like, is there anything here that we want to revisit?
Yes,
Right?
absolutely,
I mean,
especially because
yeah.
we're going a direction of
Get a
getting really
bunch of
specific.
something.
Yeah,
Like, then all of a sudden, we're gonna be like, this isn't a priority more because everybody did it.
exactly.
And now we have way too much public parking and.
With like the workforce housing, Anna, how do you envision, because I don't want to have, if somebody's going to build a residential, I don't want to have just like 4 units. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
how will you, will you, again, I don't want people to say we have affordable housing and it's
Yeah.
only a half of a floor of a 20 floor building. I don't know.
It's a
So-
hard value at this
Right.
point. Honestly, I think the reason we haven't gotten a lot of it is because the value on the units doesn't overcome all other factors of a development project at this
Right.
point. So that's where we have to value it high enough that even a few units break that barrier of being, so that it's, that one's going to be something we have to continue to work with. And again, stress it again, setting this zoning up is not going to be the catalyst of projects. It isn't. So there's so many other things that are the catalysts, a lot of that being the market that we're in, what is the demand for different types of developments, that sort of a thing. So this would facilitate it. But even if we valued affordable housing and you put like 10% of your units and it's valued at tier 3, I don't think that we're all of a sudden going to have a bunch of people building apartment buildings with 50 units of
Right.
affordable, so
for
I don't
sure.
think this PUD system is going to be able to value it enough that it's going to change our affordable housing market substantially.
Yeah.
In this alone. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great.
Good.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for
Got
the
everything, I
feedback.
feel like was the discussion.
Yeah, it was a good one and we'll be back.
Right. I don't know, we can take a short break and then got a few minutes. Good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday, February 10th. Welcome to our Clayton City Council meeting. If the city clerk could call the roll.
Councilmember Buse.
Here?
Councilmember Patel.
Here.
Councilmember Fader.
Here.
Councilmember Hummel.
Here.
Councilmember York.
Here.
Councilmember Waldman.
Here.
Mayor McAndrew.
Here.
City Manager Gibson.
Here.
City Attorney O'Keefe.
Here.
Thank you.
The first part of our meeting is an open forum. So if anybody has anything they'd like to discuss with us on an item that's not on the agenda, I don't think that's anybody in the audience here. Is there anybody online? Seeing no raised hands and nobody in chambers, we will move to our consent agenda. I will open the discussion. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Councilmember Buse?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Buse.
Aye.
Councilmember Patel.
Aye.
Councilmember Fader.
Aye.
Councilmember Hummel.
Aye.
Councilmember York.
Aye.
Councilmember Waldman.
Aye.
And Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
Thank you.
We don't have any old business. We'll move on to new business. And the first is a contract or a amended contract with St. Louis County.
Yes, Mayor. The City of Clayton and St. Louis County are parties to a contract for housing of municipal inmates originally executed on February 9th, 2004, and amended most recently in 2023. Under this agreement, St. Louis County provides detention services for individuals arrested or sentenced under the authority of the City of Clayton. On December 16th, 2025, St. Louis County Council adopted an ordinance authorizing an increase in the per diem rate charged to municipalities for the housing of inmates at the St. Louis County Justice Center. The approved order increases the daily housing rate for municipal inmates from $50 to $75, effective January 1st, 2026. The county has provided an amendment to the existing contract reflecting this rate change. All other terms and conditions of the contract remain unchanged. Staff expect this increase to have a minimal fiscal impact as the City of Clayton rarely houses inmates at the county facility and any stays are short in duration. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the ordinance authorizing execution of the contract amendment with St. Louis County.
Thank you. I'll open the discussion. Are there any questions or comments from anybody on this council? All right.
I
Anybody in
introduce,
the audience, Councilmember Buse?
I introduce Bill number 7129, approving an amendment to the contract with St. Louis County Justice Center for housing municipal prisoners to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7129, first reading, an ordinance approving an amendment, the contract with St. Louis County Justice Center for housing municipal prisoners.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilmember Buse.
I move that the council give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of Bill number 7129 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The vote passes 7-0. Let the minutes reflect that the council has given unanimous consent.
I introduce Bill number 7129, approving an amendment to the contract with the St. Louis County Justice Center for housing municipal prisoners to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7129, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving an amendment to the contract with St. Louis County Justice Center for housing municipal prisoners.
Councilmember Buse,
Aye.
Councilmember Patel,
Aye.
Councilmember Fader,
Aye.
Councilmember Hummel,
Aye.
Councilmember York,
Aye.
Councilmember Waldman,
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is a contract for masonry repairs at our historic Hanley House.
Yes, Mayor, included in the fiscal year 2026 capital improvement budget is $225,000 for exterior repairs at the historic Martin Franklin Hanley House. Staff have prioritized the repair work needed at Hanley House and begun by issuing a request for bids for masonry repair to the foundation of the building. The scope of work includes tuck pointing and overall restoration of approximately 1,200 square feet of interior limestone foundation at the Hanley House. The project is scheduled to commence in March and be completed by May 31st of 2026. On January 30th, 2026, the Parks and Recreation Department held a bid opening for the Hanley House Masonry Repairs Project. 2 companies submitted bids for the project, and Western Specialty Contractors submitted the lowest responsive bid. Staff recommends a 5% contingency to correct unknown issues that become apparent during the project. We recommend that the City Council approve the ordinance authorizing a contract with Western Specialty Contractors in the amount of $41,865, plus a 5% contingency of $2,090 for the masonry repairs project at historic Martin Franklin Hanley House.
Thank you. I'll open the discussion. Are there any questions or comments from the council?
I have just one comment. I certainly support continuing to maintain the Hanley House as something we value within our community. But we've had on our to-do someday for some time now, wanting to look long-term, how to keep this sustainable and best managed, and talked about how other cities, with the different foundations, whatever they use to preserve and best utilize for the community historic buildings. So I just hope that we get to address that soon so that we can continue to do what's best for the city and for that historic site.
Thank you. Yeah, I know the Clayton Community Foundation is working hard to, and I think it's important too that, everybody read this in the memo, but there are other repairs that'll be needed that'll be done later too, which I think will be very important. So, but I know the Clayton Community Foundation is making this a priority too. Right. But
Yes.
and I don't know if you want to add anything,
That's what I
Tony.
was going to say, is that I know it's on Alex's list and he continues to research opportunities that we might have, like a shared person that would go, or people that would go like from house to house in different municipalities and be able to open that up for interpretive learning.
Right. We've talked before about models, again, what other cities have done. So I assume Alex is looking at that as
Yeah.
well. Okay.
Right.
And there are, I think, descendants of the Hanleys coming to visit
In May.
Good.
in May.
Mhm.
They come from Seattle. So I know there's some festivities planned around their visit.
Yes.
So, yeah. Any other?
I guess I just had a quick question. I know that this was about like 18% of the total budget for this. How does that compare to like the remaining repairs percentage wise? I guess it's 18% of the total repairs needed.
Right. So our intention, as I had stated, originally we were hoping to package everything together.
Right.
That didn't work. So our intention was to start with the most things that needed the most repair first. Our intention is to next put out the bid for the roofs, which we think are the items that need to be repaired next. However, if those are significantly over budget, I would say we were going to have to go to our third item on the list. So I think we're just going to have to start chipping away at the things that need to be done there based on the amount of money that we have in the budget.
Got it. So we're not thinking this will cover, like the budget will cover all these items.
Or maybe not, just depends on how some of the bids come in. They've, obviously those 2 that came in were wildly inconsistent.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to have to look at all that and see how they come in.
Hoping, but we're probably short. Now, another thing that CCF's looking at is not only how to use Hanley House better than we're using it now, but also improvements on the grounds and how they might be able to participate with that. So I do think we'll get this work done, but it may take a mix of public and private funds.
Right. I know, and Alex is also looking at some grant funding for that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Councilmember Buse.
I introduced Bill number 7130, approving a contract with Western Specialty Contractors for repairs to the Hanley House to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7130, first reading, an ordinance approving a contract with Western Specialty Contractors for the masonry repairs project at the historic Martin Franklin Hanley House.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilmember Buse.
I move that the council give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of Bill number 7130 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The vote passes 7-0. Let the minutes reflect that the council has given unanimous consent.
I introduced Bill number 7130, approving a contract with Western Specialty Contractors for repairs to the Hanley House to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7130, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving a contract with Western Specialty Contractors for the masonry repairs project at the historic Martin Franklin Hanley House.
Councilmember Buse,
Aye.
Councilmember Patel, Councilmember Fader,
Aye.
Councilmember Hummel,
Aye.
Councilmember York,
Aye.
Councilmember Waldman,
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye. The next item on our agenda is a preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC for the property at 121 South Merrimack.
Yes, School Lot Development LLC intends to renovate the property located at 121 South Merrimack Avenue. In connection with this proposed redevelopment, the developer has requested that the city consider certain economic development incentives. To ensure that the city does not incur out-of-pocket expenses during the evaluation and negotiation phase of the project, it is standard practice to require a funding agreement. This agreement establishes the developer's obligation to fund all professional, legal, and administrative costs associated with the city's consideration of this request. The proposed ordinance authorizes the city manager to enter into a preliminary funding agreement. Approval of this ordinance will not have a fiscal impact on the general fund. Staff recommends that the city council approve an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC.
Thank you. I'll open the discussion. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Anyone online? If you have a question online, you're welcome to raise your hand. Are there any questions or comments from the council?
I want to make sure that I noticed that there's a notation here about the acknowledgement of $55,000 in funds. Is this what we anticipate the whole budget to be, or is it just what do we anticipate to occur under this?
So we do believe that this should cover all of it. We've talked to our bond counsel, we've talked to attorneys, tried to figure out from an hourly standpoint what this will end up costing. So 55,000 is the estimate. So we'll receive this money, we'll put it in escrow, we'll pay all of those associated expenses with it, and any money remaining at the end will then return to the developer. But it should be enough to cover it.
I just have one question. Is this, I know a lot of the work that will take place related to this is contractual services that we get from third parties. Do we track any of our own expenses for internal
This will be
employees?
all for third-party
It's
expenses.
only third party.
Correct.
Okay.
For the
that's-
creation of the documents themselves, which
Yeah.
we don't have the capability of doing in-house.
Understand. Thank you.
I just want to confirm, and I think it's been said, that this is simply a process to allow us to continue to consider and evaluate whether to move forward on incentives in connection with the project. So
That's correct.
once that's done, we will come to some final decision about that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I introduced Bill number 7131, approving preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC for property at 121 South Merrimack Avenue to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7131, first reading, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC in connection with the proposed redevelopment project at 121 South Merrimack Avenue.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilmember Buse.
I move that the council give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of Bill number 7131 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The vote passes 7-0. Let the minutes reflect that the council has given unanimous consent.
I introduced Bill number 7131, approving preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC for property at 121 South Merrimack Avenue, to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney.
Bill number 7131, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a preliminary funding agreement with School Lot Development LLC in connection with a proposed redevelopment project at 121 South Merrimack Avenue.
Councilmember Buse.
Aye.
Councilmember Patel.
Aye.
Councilmember Fader.
Aye.
Councilmember Hummel.
Aye.
Councilmember York.
Aye.
Councilmember Waldman.
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye. Thank you. So the last item on our agenda is an appeal of the Architectural Review Board's decision for construction of a new single-family house at 436 Oakley Drive. So just in terms of a process, we will, I think our city attorney will just remind everybody what has been made available to the council ahead of time, all the minutes. He'll go through a list of items that we were given, as well as, a copy of the appeal packet that all of you submitted. I'll invite you to make a presentation and then see, there might be council members that have questions, and I invite you to answer those. And then I'm not sure if there will be anybody online. I'm not sure if there's anybody else online. I'm sure you guys have all figured out one of our council members is online, so he might have questions. So that is how we will go forth. So with that, if you want to wait for a second, Kevin, if you would like to just remind us what we've relied upon and what's been made available for us to assess.
Thank you,
the
ma'am.
appeal.
This will acknowledge that the council has received and made available to, and has been made available to the council, documentary and prior and evidence and information developed through the processing of the application, which is the subject of this appeal, so that the council will take administrative notice of the municipal code of the city of Clayton as amended to date in total, and in particular, Title IV of the Clayton Municipal Code regarding land use regulations, and especially Chapter 400 of the Clayton Municipal Code, including Article 3 thereof, relating to the Architectural Review Board. In addition, the council will take administrative notice of sections 400.230 and 400.240 of the municipal code relating to appeals of ARB decisions. The council will also take administrative notice of appellant's initial and subsequent applications for site plan and architectural approval of a new residence at 436 Oakley Drive. All files and records of the Department of Planning and Development Services relating to the appellant's applications in consideration thereof. All documents, testimony, and evidence offered at the Plan Commission and ARB proceedings with respect to appellant's applications, including the agendas, minutes, and visual and audio recordings of the Plan Commission and ARB meetings regarding appellant's applications. Appellant's appeal filed in this matter and all exhibits attached thereto. Appellant's appeal to the Clayton Board of Adjustment regarding the same allegations as raised in ground number 2 of the appeal now before the council. And finally, the council will take administrative notice of the staff reports filed with the Plan Commission and ARB with respect to appellant's applications and filed with the council with respect to this appeal. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Kevin. So we do have new speaker time limits, but you're like an applicant. So when an applicant presents to us, on a new project, there aren't any time limits. But if somebody were to pop in online, there would be some time limits related to people just speaking in support. But as the applicant, you don't have any time limits, or the appellant really. But given all the things that we have been able to review, I would just, you don't necessarily have to repeat everything that has been given to us. But yeah.
City Council.
Is the microphone on?
Light red or green?
Push the button at the bottom. And then once it turns green, then I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that. So
All right, let's try
Thank
that
you.
again. Good
otherwise
evening.
the recording and the
Yeah.
people online can't. hear.
Understood.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Clayton City Council. My name is Stephen L. Kling Jr., and I'm an attorney with Jenkins and Kling PC, offices at 150 North Merrimack Avenue, Clayton, Missouri, 63105. And I'm here tonight on behalf of AMJNC LLC, which is the owner of the property that's subject to the appeal. The manager of the property and its agent is Dr. Tom Lucas, who's also here tonight. Before I get to the two appeal matters, I do want to make a couple comments preliminarily. One, with respect to the staff report, there's a suggestion that the second appeal with respect to whether or not the 60-day time limit was in effect or not should go to the Board of Adjustment. I will suggest strongly to you that it should not. A provision of your code that says those decisions go to the Board of Adjustment apply only to decisions for building officials and administrative officials. The city attorney is not an administrative official. He has no decision-making power. He is not an administrative service that's identified in your charter. Your charter goes on to say that the city attorney's position is advisory only, which is consistent with the Missouri statute, section 98.340. So it's only advisory. He can't make decisions. The advice he gave to the ARB was obviously taken by the ARB because they didn't act to the contrary on it, and he was merely advising the ARB with respect to his opinion. Since your code has a specific provision that ARB decisions are appealed to this body, and the code also says the specific governs over the general, then obviously our position is that both of these appeals should be heard by you all tonight. So on to the appeals. There are two appeals tonight. Briefly, the first one, there were two plans that were filed during the Architectural Review Board. I think for simplicity, unless anyone has any questions, I'll refer to them as to the brick exterior plan, which is the second plan, and the stone exterior plan, which was the first plan. So I'm going to take up the second plan first. The applicant's position is that the decision to deny that by the ARB was arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. And really what was at issue with respect to that particular plan was the height of the building. There was a concern that the building was too high and that it should be reduced 2 feet, which the applicant was unwilling to do. The applicant did provide, as part of the record, all sorts of pictures of properties in the neighborhood. The staff recommended approval of the plan. The height of the building complies with the code, so there wasn't a request for something outside of what the code permits. The height issue didn't come up earlier. It only came up in connection with the last hearing, so it was a little bit of a surprise. There were no studies, no reports, no extrinsic evidence saying why that additional 2 feet was making the building incompatible with the neighborhood. And in support of that, we filed, in connection with the appeal, letters from 2 architects indicating that they believe it is compatible with the neighborhood, together with some letters from some neighbors. I will note no one showed up to speak in opposition to that plan at the hearing. So it's our position that, and there's also a site plan drawing that we submitted in there so you could actually see the site plan of the roof. It's part of the appeal package. So we feel that the building is compatible. The code section has goals, and of which are to be looked at by the ARB. They are not conditions or criteria. And our position is that this particular building plan, the brick exterior plan, if you will, is compatible with the neighborhood. And I guess before I go on to the second plan, would you like to ask any questions, or would you rather wait until I finish? What is the pleasure of the
Why don't
council?
we just wait until you're finished?
That's fine. Thank you. With respect to what I'll call the stone plan, which was the first plan, It is applicant's position that this plan was submitted This plan was submitted on was submitted before November 3rd. It was actually first heard on November 3rd, 2025. Your code section says that if the plan is not denied within 60 days after its first submittal, it's deemed approved. It is applicant's position that plan was never denied. There is an exception if there's a written agreement for an extension. My client never signed a written agreement that I am aware of, and I will submit to you that that original plan still has not been denied. So even if there's an argument that it extended to January 5th, here we are well more than 60 days, and there's been no decision denying that original plan, which I refer to as the Stone Plan. So by operation of law, our opinion is that that plan is approved. I would like, in light of the staff report and my suggestions with respect to the issue of whether or not the second appeal should go to the Board of Adjustment, that the city charter be made a part of the record, because I cited some charter provisions here tonight. Also, I do understand that there were 2 letters that came in from residents after we filed our appeal in support of this project, in addition to the ones we filed with our appeal package, and I would request that those also be added to the record of this proceeding. All right, happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, can I ask one question? At the ARB hearing, there was discussion of substantial change, whether lowering it by the requested 2 feet would be a substantial change. And then you just said that your client was not willing to consider reducing the height. Is that right? Can you just clarify that?
At that hearing, yes. I mean, we have looked at some alternatives since then, but at that hearing, that is correct.
At that hearing, it's correct that.
My client was unwilling to
Okay.
reduce it
Okay,
by
thank
2
you.
feet.
Councilmember Patel, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment. Thank you.
Just a curiosity. So my understanding is that at the initial meeting, the ARB voted to continue to the next meeting, and then your client then resubmitted a new plan. So I guess what I'm wondering is I heard what you said regarding the Stone Plan, but what I'm wondering is that a plan that you want to move forward with, or is it the brick plan that you want to move forward with, or you want to move forward with both plans?
We are appealing both decisions. Obviously, there might be an effect where if you approve the brick plan, that we would withdraw the Stone Plan.
Does your client have a preference for one plan or the other?
I believe he would prefer the brick plan. I think that was the one that was generally agreeable, other than the height issue. As I said, there may be some ability to reduce the roof a little bit without, what my client's concerned with is the interior heights. There may be some options to possibly mitigate that a little bit. I don't know that it can be done entirely, but yes, he wants the height. He believes that's important for not only for his living there, but for saleability.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Lucas, do you have anything to add, or you don't? Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead. Do you have questions for the appellant?
Yeah, I just put it up. So I'm just clarifying. So your client would be open to addressing some of the visual external height issues, maybe not to the extent that the board and you were talking about initially, but it sounds like he's open to that down the line. Is that correct?
My understanding, and I'll look to Mr. Lucas to correct me, but since the appeal was filed, we've obviously talked with architects looking for possible ways to mitigate some of this. And my understanding is that we can, without compromising the interior, we could reduce part of the roof line so that the total height of the building could come down. If, in other words, the pitch of the roof could be reduced. There may be some issues on materials that we use for the roof that we'd have to work through, but you aren't going to see the roof anyway. So yes, that is a possibility, yes.
Okay. Which from my understanding, watching it is, I think it sounds like they were talking about the heights of the floors, but ultimately they were getting at the height of the visualness outside. So that's why I wanted to kind of provide some clarity on exactly kind of where Dr. Lucas was at the moment. So thank you. That was the only question I had. Thanks, Mayor.
I don't see anybody online. There's nobody else here. So if you are finished with your initial presentation, I guess I'd like to suggest that I think there's some legal questions that we'd like to discuss with our attorney.
May I
Yep, go ahead.
make
Kevin.
an inquiry first, Mr. Kling? First of all, your request that the city charter be taken into administrative notice is fine. And the 2 letters, I don't know where they are. I don't know.
I have copies here. I can submit them.
if
They
you
should
would-
have been filed with the city clerk, I believe.
If you would make sure you give them to Ms. Fraser, that would be, the city clerk, that'd be fine.
Okay.
We'll take administrative
Sure.
notice of that as well. And I noticed under the city's ordinance, the city council sitting as the appellate body for the Architectural Review Board has authority to affirm, reverse, or modify the ARB decision under appeal. If there is a modification you want the council to consider, I suggest it is incumbent to get that modification in the record and before the council's ASAP. I'm sorry, describing it seriously.
Yeah, that's what
not
I'm
gonna
saying.
cut it.
I'm not sure. I need my client to describe that, but I think he can describe the roof potential modification.
Well, it's the plan. It's not someone's
Okay.
opinion of it or what they think.
I can't submit a plan tonight, obviously.
Do you want the opportunity to do that?
I'd kind of like to know what
I think what he's suggesting,
everybody thinks.
well,
If you could come up, because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, otherwise Jeff can't.
Hi, I'm Tom Lucas from 8010 Pershing. I guess I would like to know what the city council thinks about this. The one option that's come up that might be done would basically be to change the pitch of the roof, which would probably then mandate that roof be a steel roof instead of a asphalt roof. But in a way, it's sort of a moot point because probably that roof, as was discussed in the ARB, even the way it is, isn't even going to be seen. I don't know what happened. People got hung up. They were talking about interior heights when I don't really understand how that's in the jurisdiction of the ARB. They're looking at the outside of the building. And if they're talking about the exterior heights and then the roof, and then they're saying, well, you're probably not even going to see the roof. Well, if they're hung up on it and want to bring it down, I can make a more expensive roof out of steel that you're still not going to see. If they want a couple feet shorter roof, I could do that if that's what the city council would think would be needed, but I think it kind of makes a more expensive house for maybe no practical purpose other than satisfying someone who says they want the house 2 feet shorter.
Mr. Lucas, we're not in a position to advise you what the council's opinion is. I was inquiring with your lawyer, if you want the council to consider a modification, you need to tell us what that is.
Well, no, so I think they asked him about if.
So it sounds like you would ultimately like us to make a decision on the appeal before us, before.
Yeah, I mean, then I can come back again if it says, no, we're not approving it, yada, yada. I don't even know what else if you just say yes or no, or you make other comments. I don't know how that works.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
And this is for the city attorney, I think. So my limited exposure to the Plan Commission and ARB has been that there are sometimes approvals of things that are not perfectly spec'd out on a plan document, but with some relative clarity of the condition, like approve with the following condition to be verified by staff upon submission of compliant plans or something. That's how I've understood that. So if we have the ability to approve, reject, or modify, I'm interested in how our ability may be different from what I've witnessed prior.
The appellant has framed the question posed to the council. That's their prerogative. And that question is to affirm, modify, or reverse the ARB's decision. I would not speculate as to how the council might reach some judgment of a modification. I don't think it is the council's obligation to create a modification. And what I was trying to do is to get the appellant to tell us if they want you to consider a modification or want you to consider the plan that was ruled on by the ARB. And if they want you to consider a modification, I think we need to work with council on how that is going to occur.
Can I add, having served on the Plan Commission in the past in the ARB, I agree with Mr. O'Keefe's point, because I think what the Plan Commission does, it approves a specific plan that is in front of it, that the staff has looked at. There's actually a specific drawings, renderings in front of the commission members. And I think Mr. O'Keefe's point is that I understand both Mr. Kling and Mr. Lucas are saying, well, we could change the pitch of the roof, et cetera. But until we know what that looks like, if we're going to sort of substitute ourselves now for the ARB in this modification process, which is authorized, we need to see what it looks like. Can't just have it, and we can't say, well, as long as the staff thinks that they kind of did what we thought they were going to do, that doesn't cut it. So
Mr. Kling, did you want to respond to?
Yeah, I disagree a little bit with Mr. O'Keefe. Won't be the first time that we've disagreed, but I believe that your code gives you the authority to modify. You may choose not to do it, but you have the authority to modify and however you think is appropriate. I don't disagree that, maybe there's some details here. I mean, this is a recent development in terms of the possibility of having some sort of compromise position. But I do want to state that I believe you have the power to, it's very clear that it says modify. That's a power that you have.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Kling, if you want the council to consider a modified plan, I think it's incumbent upon you to present what that plan is going to be. If you don't wish to do that, that's okay. I just would suggest to you that if there's Plan C, somebody's going to have to draft it and present it, and I don't think it's going to be the city council.
Councilmember Waldman, I think this might be a good time for us to have some legal discussions with our attorney. I know you have would you mind reading that and see if there's a majority of us in agreement to do that?
I move that the city council hold a closed meeting with a closed vote and record as authorized by section 610.021, 1, 2, and 3 revised statutes of Missouri relating to legal issues, real estate, and/or personnel, negotiation of contract pursuant to section 610.021, 12 RSMO, and/or proprietary information pursuant to section 610.021, 15, and/or information related to public safety and security measures pursuant to section 610.021, 18 and 19 RSMO.
Mr. O'Keefe.
1 second, just one.
I'm sorry.
Yep. So we have a second.
Councilmember Buse.
Aye.
Councilmember Patel.
Are we adjourning and
Yeah.
closing discussion? I mean, like,
Why don't, let's just decide. Yeah.
You can have the vote now and conduct the closed meeting at the time when you consider it appropriate.
okay, so we could still allow the appellant
Yes.
and his counsel to
Yes.
speak.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I say yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Hummel. Councilmember Waldman.
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Councilmember York.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
So we will go into closed session. As I mentioned to you beforehand, you're welcome to wait, but we're not adjourning our meeting right now, so we will come back in.
But
So,
Mr. Lucas asked a question of Mr. O'Keefe because I don't seem to be able to answer it for him.
I'm sorry?
Can Mr. Lucas ask a question of Mr. O'Keefe because I can't seem to be able to answer it for him to his satisfaction?
I'm not sure I can either, but
Okay.
sure, go ahead, Tom.
I was also on the understanding that this council could modify if they wanted to. I was hoping they wouldn't modify them. They say, yeah, what you came here to appeal, it's good. But if they had the option to modify, it sounds like that's going to be discouraged, even though it might be allowed. If I say, well, let's continue it to next time and I'll come back with plans, when I submit plans to be reconsidered, can I submit them to be considered at the same time as those instead of saying, okay, forget the ones that I brought to this meeting tonight. And instead, we're going to look at the one with the lower pitch on it. Can I say, hey, I'd like the council to look at both of these. Can that happen? Can you look at two sets of plans at the same meeting?
I think my understanding is that because we don't have concrete plans in front of us, Tom, that might be hard for us right now.
Right.
But why don't you let us, we've made a decision to go into closed section to discuss some of these legal matters. So why don't you let us do that?
Okay,
And then we will come back to you.
sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good evening. We are back from our recess where we had a closed session. Mr. City Attorney, if you could.
thank you, Madam Mayor. In consultation with the attorney for the appellant, I understand that appellant wishes to have the opportunity to submit a revised plan which would address the height of the building through changing the roof pitch and changing the roofing materials, and would like the opportunity for the Architectural Review Board to consider those revisions. So by consent of the applicant, the appellant, I recommend that the council move to take the appeal currently before the council under submission on the record established thus far, to suspend further consideration of the appeal and allow the appellant to submit a revised plan for consideration by the ARB as to building height, roof pitch, and roofing materials, and any other additional adjustments that the applicant may wish to make. Excuse me, Mr. Kling, have I stated the situation correctly?
Yes, it would be in suspension while that proceeding is going on. The only other thing I'd ask is, I think you're all aware, we filed a precautionary appeal with the Board of Adjustment, and maybe if that could be held off to be scheduled while all this is going on, so we don't spend more time on this, and I appreciate your patience.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll take that as a request and ask that you send an email to the
I can.
planning department to do that, because it's not really up to the council to schedule the Board of Adjustment proceedings, but understood and agreed with no objection.
I will do that.
So if it pleases the council, a motion to the effect I stated in terms of taking the matter under submission and suspending it pending consideration of a revised plan by the ARB would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kling.
Yep.
Emmett? Thank you.
Good to see you, Steve.
We've come to the end of our meeting. If anybody, we've been here for a little bit, but if anybody has something that they'd appreciate telling us, otherwise I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.